Baik, may I have your attention please? Our agenda is about begin. Please have a nice seat and back to your position. And please switch off or make sure your mobile phone is in a silent position during joining this event. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan bagi kita semua. Good morning everyone. It is honor to us to inform you that among us here we have the Honorable Dean Faculty of Psychology, University of Merdeka Malang, Dr. Malang Warsiwulandari, S.Psi, M.Psi, Psikolog, the Honorable Vice Dean Faculty of Psychology, University of Merdeka Malang, Muhammad Untung Manara, S.Psi, M.A, PhD, the Honorable all Lecturer and Staff Faculty of Psychology, University of Merdeka Malang, and also the audience and guest lecture participant in this morning. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let's thank to God who has given us some mercy and blessing so that we can attend this agenda without any troubles and obstacles. And here I am, Dea Ananda Febrianti, as the Master of Ceremony, will guide the guest lecture today. Welcome. Today is guest lecture is about turbulence of a traveler, the impact of culture on a mental health by Mr. Dino Johannes. We would like to thank everyone here for making time to attend this remarkable guest lecture. Thank you. But before starting our agenda, let me explain the agenda schedule today. The first agenda is opening, the second agenda is singing national anthem, the Indonesia Raya song, the third agenda is greeting. The greeting will be delivered by the Faculty Psychology, University of Merdeka Malang, and the fourth agenda is a speech, the explanation from the speaker, and the last agenda is a closing and take a photo together. The first agenda is opening. So before we open this guest lecture, we want to pray together in our belief. So pray begin. The prayer is done. The second agenda is sing Indonesian national anthem, the Indonesia Raya song. All the audience, please kindly all rise. Thank you. ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seat. Thank you. The third agenda is greetings. The greetings will be delivered by the Faculty of Psychology, University of Merdeka Malang, Dr. Nawangwarsi Wulandari, S.Psi, M.Psi, Psikolog. Please welcome to the stage.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi dan salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Good morning, Dino. Alhamdulillah, puji syukur kehadirat Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala bahwa pada pagi hari ini kita bisa berkumpul bersama di tempat yang sangat istimewa ini, dalam kegiatan International Guest Lecture. Pagi ini terasa istimewa sekali ya anak-anak. Sebelumnya saya sapa dulu yang saya hormati Pak Untung, Bu Agustin sebagai Wakil Dekan 1, Bu Thuba yang hadir di sini nanti mendampingi kegiatan kita. Yang saya hormati juga perwakilan dari RBA, terima kasih sudah hadir, dan juga Dino, terima kasih sudah hadir, dan yang berbahagia anak-anakku semuanya ya. Anak-anak, pagi hari ini terasa istimewa sekali bahwa kita kedatangan seorang tamu dari jauh, yang yaitu Dino Johannes ya. Dino datang dari Belanda ke Indonesia, dan pagi hari ini Dino akan sharing dengan kita semua. Kegiatan ini kita lakukan sebagai salah satu dari kegiatan internasional yang sedang kita dorong. Dari kegiatan ini sudah kita lakukan beberapa waktu yang lalu, dimulai dari setahun yang lalu kita ada kegiatan internasional dan terus kita tingkatkan sampai dengan hari ini dan akan terus kita lakukan di waktu-waktu ke depan. Seperti saat ini di waktu yang bersamaan ada mahasiswa kita, kakak tingkat kalian yang saat ini sedang student exchange ke Malaysia ya. Ada satu orang, dan kami berharap sekali nanti kegiatan-kegiatan internasional itu bisa kalian juga akses, bukan hanya student exchange tapi juga mungkin kompetisi-kompetisi internasional, sehingga prestasi kita yang sudah kita miliki itu juga bisa bertambah di lingkup internasional ya. Itu harapan kami, sehingga tujuan dari kegiatan kita pada pagi hari ini adalah memberikan wawasan, membuka cakrawala berpikir kita berkaitan nanti dengan sharing yang akan diberikan oleh Dino. Dino ini pengalamannya sudah sangat banyak, dan karena dia traveler, saya yakin Dino punya cerita yang sangat menarik karena dia bertemu dengan orang-orang dari belahan dunia yang mungkin berbeda, pastinya berbeda ya kulturnya dengan yang Dino miliki. Nah, itu akan menjadi kajian menarik buat kita yang belajar tentang perilaku manusia. Saya berharap ini bisa membuka wawasan, membuka cakrawala, dan saya ingin juga kita belajar bahasa internasional kepada tamu-tamu, terutama ya melalui tamu-tamu yang hadir nanti, termasuk Dino pada hari ini. Nanti kalian boleh sharing, kalian boleh bertanya apapun yang kalian ingin ketahui ya, nanti semoga bisa diakomodir, semoga bisa terjawab semua pertanyaan-pertanyaan kalian. Special for Dino, thank you for coming and sharing with us. I hope it will be inspiring for my student. Sekali lagi terima kasih buat kalian juga dan panitia-panitia yang sudah menyelenggarakan mensupport kegiatan ini terlaksana. Terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you for the speech, Dr. Nawar Wulandari. Ladies and gentlemen, now we proceed to the guest lecture agenda. This presentation will be delivered by Mr. Dino Johannes, and also this agenda will be guided by Mrs. Thuba Septa as the moderator. So for the speaker and moderators are welcome to the place that has been provided.
Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, salam sejahtera, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. Good morning everyone. Okay, welcome to our exciting international guest lecture held by Faculty of Psychology at University of Merdeka, Malang. I am Thuba. I'm so honored to be your moderator in this session, and we are thrilled to have Mr. Dino Johannes with us, who will share his insightful and unique topic today. It's about through the lens of traveler, the impact of culture on mental health. I believe with his spatial experience and also spatial traveling through the world will give us many insights about mental health and the impact of the impact of culture to mental health. But before, I would like to introduce our guest lecturer today. He is Mr. Dino Johannes from Netherlands and experienced over 30 projects in Southeast Asia, Australia, and also Netherlands, focusing on teaching and farming. He got Cambridge CELTA, right? Certified English to refugees and various age of groups. Start from kindergarten, right? To adult. Yeah, then, his practical experience in orchard and fruit farming with permanent design course certification. I don't know about that. It's about farming, right? Yeah, it's about farming. And interesting is his hobbies are photography, movies, yoga, and also poetry. And he enjoys so much good coffee and also fruits, just like me. And welcome to Indonesia, because we have many varieties of coffee, and it has many tastes. Yeah. Okay. And today, without further ado, please join me, Mr. Dino Johannes, and let's give applause for Mr. Dino. Bisa tolong dibantu dulu disettingkan. Bisa tolong dibantu disettingkan laptopnya. Disettingkan laptopnya. Ya. Sini. Masih tahu dari tadi tidak disettingkan.
Alright. First of all, selamat pagi semua. Good morning. Really nice to see all of you. Today will be in English, but I will try to talk slow and hopefully you understand. But I'm very happy to see you. I've never been to this university before, and it's really cool that such a big group showed up today. So it makes me very happy. Thank you so much for coming. Today, you're getting a guest lecture by someone who is not a psychologist and who does not work in psychology. I just want to make that very clear that I'm not an expert. But still, today, I hope that I can share some interesting things with you. Also things that might have a relationship with psychology. So maybe there will be something useful for you. Okay, there we go. The presentation is here. Yeah, let's start. So today, it will be my perspective. So it was already said that I really like traveling, and I really like to travel in combination with volunteering. But let's start when I was young, very young, right? In the Netherlands, in my country, far away in Europe, people like to have their holiday in other countries, right? So you see me sitting there with my sister and family. It's very common that in the Netherlands, people will have a holiday in France, Spain, Belgium, right? And they do something they call camping, right? Maybe you guys sometimes go to Bedengan, right? With your tent, right? I went there too last year. It was really good. But yeah, people in the Netherlands really love to do camping, right? Same like this with you can see my father and my sister also. So in the Netherlands, you do stuff like that with your family, right? You go camping, maybe you have a short holiday for a few weeks. But traveling like that, even though it is really fun, you only get a very limited view of a culture, right? I didn't learn about French culture when I was camping, right? And I didn't learn about Spanish culture when I was doing camping. Later on, when I was a bit older, I traveled a bit more. So this last photo, you guys know where this is, right? Right? This is Prambanan, of course, right? I think you should know. You're Indonesian, so you should know. But then, like, I traveled a bit more, and you get to learn more about a country. But still, if you're only traveling, doing sightseeing, it's very limited, right? I don't really get a good picture of what Indonesian culture is like. But maybe can I just give you like the signal? Okay. All right. So later on, when I was older, so I'm talking about when I was 25 years old. So right now I am 32. Yeah, 32 years old. But when I was 25 years old, I started traveling longer, right? So I did one trip that was more than 2 years. And then I really started to experience how you can learn about a country if you stay longer, right? So instead of sightseeing, like go very fast, I stay in one place for 3 weeks, 1 month, 2 months, right? And then you really learn more about a culture. So here are some examples. Maybe you recognize the picture in the top. That was actually 2 years ago. I was volunteering in Sidoarjo, and we went to the Bromo. But I also went to many other places like Malaysia and Cambodia, Nepal, Japan, South Korea. So slowly, by doing the volunteering and staying long in a place, I got a better picture about a culture, right? So it was very interesting. Here's some more photos of doing volunteering in Malang. Actually, Bedengong is right there. Actually, that was a really cool event. We did a collaboration with a group of biology teachers doing a biology class for children outside. It was really fun. But I also did those kinds of classes in India and Sri Lanka, which was great. Yes. So when you go to a new country, right, sometimes you get something that we call culture shock. I'm not sure how you call it in Indonesia, like kaget budaya? I don't know. There's no word. Okay, well. So often when you visit a new country and you stay longer, you get something called culture shock, right? Because there are some things about the culture you're not used to, right? Here are just some very simple examples that I found online, right? Of course, like by now, I'm already an expert in using a squatting toilet, right? But these are very simple examples, right? Like using a squatting toilet, like there's no tissues on the toilet, that maybe you have more showers in the day, you always eat rice, right? I think like kalau tidak makan nasi, tidak makan, kan? Okay. Like that. So these are very simple examples. Yes. This was my biggest culture shock. It's like, for me, it was like, oh my God, this is unacceptable. You eat pisang goreng and then you add cheese? That's so weird. Like, who does that? It's like, still cannot believe it. Yeah, and then, yeah, and you add chocolate also. It's like, wow. Still very shocked.
Can I add something weird for us? Yeah, when Clara came here, she ate nasi, rice, with mango, and ate kecap manis. Yeah, that's very weird for us, but no for Clara, one of her friend, his friend, who work in RBA too.
Right. Yeah, but yeah, for me this one was really weird. Also you have like salad buah dan tambah keju juga. Like no, not for me. Okay, but yes. So those are very simple examples of culture shock. But when I think about culture shock, I think of more serious things, right? Here are two definitions of culture shock. The older one by, I think a psychologist called Oberg, right? The psychological disorientation that most people experience when they move for an extended period of time into a culture different from their own, right? For example, if you go to England, you stay there for a few months, maybe you will get culture shock, right? The other definition is a bit simpler, right? The experience of those suddenly immersed in a culture very different from their own. I prefer the first one because I think when you spend more time, those culture shocks become more visible, right? If you stay in a country for a few months, a year, 5 years, right, then you really start to see, wow, the culture works like this, right? So these are actually some of the real culture shocks that I had in Indonesia, right? So not the pisang goreng. That's just weird. But these are the real culture shocks, right? So for example, one thing that I sometimes struggle with is jam karet, right? For me, I don't like it. No. That's why I was here very early today. Did you see? Yep. Another thing would be disrespect for nature, right? In Europe, people really try to keep nature clean, right? When I go to Bedengan or Bromo or some other place in nature, usually I see trash everywhere, right? That's very different than in my country. sometimes I would also be quite shocked by the pay gap, right? So with that, I mean that if you compare the salaries of the Netherlands to Indonesia, it's so different, and I was like very shocked to see some of the salaries. When I was volunteering at a school in Riau, I visited a school in the countryside, and I saw the pay slip of the teachers, and it was, for me, it seemed like so low that I just didn't understand how do these people survive? Like, how do you use so little money to survive? So I was quite shocked by it. But they're still very happy people, so I guess they make it work. Oh, and also the formalities, right? Sometimes when I go somewhere, I think here actually it is not so bad, but I had some other experiences where the formalities, for example, during a lecture, took so long, right? And for me, and also I can imagine for you as students, maybe if the formalities are very long, maybe it's very boring, right? So that was something that I thought was interesting. But also, culture shocks can be positive as well, right? When I spend more time in Indonesia, one thing that I really love is respect for elders, because in the Netherlands, we don't have that so much, unfortunately. Also, your obsession with food, right? I think usually when I talk to any Indonesian, like the first question they ask me is like what kind of food do you like? Or sudah coba bakso? Something like that. So I really like that the culture of food is very important here, right? Also, the hospitality is amazing, right? I think in the Netherlands, people can be hospitable, but Indonesia is like, right? I think also when I talk to other travelers, right, Indonesia is well known to be a great country for hospitality. And also one thing I love is the strong traditions, right? You have traditions in dancing, singing, like batik, like all these cool traditions that all Indonesians try to keep alive. In my country, we don't have that very much. You see, nobody in my country is wearing traditional clothing, which is a shame. So yeah, we do also have positive culture shock. So this is kind of what the process of culture shock can look like. This is from that same man, Oberg. So maybe you're familiar with the word honeymoon, right? When you get married, you have your like very happy phase, like it's all like beautiful and cute, but then maybe after it becomes more difficult, right? For example, also if you're in a new country, right? You come to England and you think like, oh, so nice here, like all the buildings are so beautiful, but then you stay longer and then maybe there are some things from the culture that make it very difficult for you, right? So then you get that culture shock. And then maybe slowly after you start recovering, right? And then eventually you have adjusted to this new culture, right? Culture shock is over. Okay. So that's how the process can look like. Actually, when I travel, I really enjoy culture shock, even though sometimes it can be quite uncomfortable, right? For example, even the jam karet, like sometimes it really frustrates me, but still it is very interesting, you know? Or some other difficult things, maybe they're difficult, but still it makes the culture interesting, right? Different than my culture. So in one way, I actually kind of want to have culture shock when I travel. But I will say, I am also very lucky because as a traveler, you are in a very privileged position, right? For example, when I'm in Indonesia, right, I can hear about different cultural things, but it doesn't really affect me because I am still a bule, right? It doesn't affect me. Maybe I can give you one example. right? Sometimes I had conversations with people. So for example, I would meet women who were already over their 30s and still unmarried, right? In the Netherlands, this is no problem, right? I'm 32. I don't think I'm gonna get married before I'm 40. And I'm totally happy with that. That's totally fine. Like, I don't have any pressure from my family to get married. But I think maybe if a person here in Indonesia tells me that they're still unmarried, then I automatically think, oh, this must be very difficult for them, right? Because maybe the pressure to get married is very strong, right? Maybe from their parents, from their family, from their friends even, right? So even though that part of the culture maybe is very difficult for a local citizen, it does not affect me, right? So as a traveler, you can observe the culture, but you're not affected by it. Oh, here's another example, right? Well, you guys probably know the big city of Singapore, right? I think many people, including me, when I first came to Singapore, I was walking in the city, I was like, wow, like all these buildings, so beautiful, like it's so green. There's these amazing food courts everywhere, like good food, and beautiful parks, right? Everything seems so well organized, right? Not many traffic jams. There's playgrounds for the kids. There are huge shopping malls, boulevards. Like everything you need is in that city. But when I actually started coming back to Singapore and staying with some friends, they actually told me that many people in Singapore really have to work so hard. Like they have to do overtime every week. Their overtime doesn't get paid. And when I start hearing that, I was thinking to myself, wow, this city is so amazing, but if you live here, maybe you don't even get the chance to enjoy it, right? Because you just have to work so much. So then I was thinking to myself, okay, well, Singapore is a beautiful city to visit, right, for me. It's a beautiful city to visit, but I don't want to live there, no. I mean, I like to work also, but I don't want to work in a way that I cannot enjoy the city, right? So for me, that was kind of like a culture shock, right? Oh, wow, these people have to work so hard in a city that's so amazing, they don't even get the chance to enjoy it, right? So again, right, in that situation, I was able to observe, right? But I wasn't living there, right? So it was quite nice. But then, after culture shock, right, let's say you stay somewhere for a long time. For example, when you're studying, right, you get maybe the culture shock when you're there, right? You go through the honeymoon phase, you get the culture shock, you recover, you've adjusted to your new culture, right? For example, if you study in Europe. But then when you come back to Indonesia, you might get something that we call reverse culture shock, right? Which is similar but very different, right? So it looks like that, right? You go through the honeymoon phase of coming back, right? Well, everybody's so happy to see you again, right? Your family is like, oh, welcome back, right? Your friends are like so happy to see you. But by now, you have already adjusted to that other culture, right? For example, the culture in England. Right? So you're totally used to English culture, right? The way of living there, the facilities they have there, maybe the food, the English traditions, maybe also the character of English people, and especially how they work, right? If you're studying, I think this is also very important. You're maybe used to a way of working and working together, and maybe even a way of studying, right? So let's say you come back in Indonesia and after this honeymoon phase, you will get culture shock again, but about your own country, right? Maybe about Indonesia, right? And then after that, again, you would have to recover and adjust back to your own culture. So that's what we call reverse culture shock. But yeah, maybe also because right now I'm talking to a group of Indonesian psychology students, right? I can imagine that maybe some of you might have patients who will experience reverse culture shock. Maybe I can get hands up. Who here has friends who study abroad? Who has friends who study abroad? Mungkin siapa yang punya teman yang kuliah di negara luar? Di sini? Hanya ini? Oh, kaget. Karena biasanya aku mendengar, oh di sana juga ya. Aku sudah mendengarkan that many people actually here also want to study abroad, right? Even here in Malang, I've heard quite a lot of people who are studying in Europe and some even in the US. So I think the chances that if later, right, you work as psychologist, maybe you would get some patients that might experience reverse culture shock, right? So for example, international students, right? Or Indonesian expats, right? So expats are usually workers who have a specialty in certain work and they work outside, right? Maybe even if it's just in Malaysia or in Thailand, right? They might work for a few years and then they come back. And there's also migrant workers, right? Those are people maybe with not so specialized work, but they also work in another country, right? I have a few friends from Kerinci who work in Kuala Lumpur, right? They work in hotels. I think also it's very common for Indonesians to work in construction or agriculture in other countries, right? Those people might also experience reverse culture shock, right? Maybe the sad thing about this, maybe I can imagine that, for example, international students and Indonesian expats, right? Those people might have money, right, to pay for a psychologist, right, or to go to a therapist. But all those migrant workers, right, I don't think they would ever, if they experience reverse culture shock, that they would ever go to a psychologist, right? Because also that costs money, right? Which I can imagine maybe is a bit sad. So now I just want to talk a little bit something that I found very interesting, especially as someone who is not familiar in the field of psychology. So it turns out that there was a famous psychologist called Geert Hofstede. Right? Maybe that name sounds a bit weird to you, but that was a Dutch person and a very famous psychologist who came up with these dimensions of culture. Right? So he came up with 6, so you see them here on the screen. So we have power distance, individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, uncertainty avoidance, short versus long-term orientation, and indulgence. Okay, now these are very, very difficult English words, but they are interesting because using those dimensions, you can see the differences between two countries, right? You can compare one country to the other, right? How is the culture different? This is exactly what Geert Hofstede did for many countries, right? I'm not sure, has anyone ever heard of this from Geert Hofstede? No? Right. Today, I'm not going to talk about all 6, but I've picked the 3 where I thought these are the ones with the biggest differences, right, between Indonesia and the Netherlands. All right? Okay. So, if you look at those 3, so you see this graph. So on the left, the vertical axis shows individualism versus collectivism. So you can see Netherlands is very high for individualism. Yeah, it has a score of 80, while Indonesia is quite low, so it's more on collectivism, right? And you can also see the horizontal axis, there is power distance. Maybe I will tell more about that later, but you can see that Indonesia has a fairly large power distance, almost 80, and the Netherlands has a very, well, not very, but a lower power distance, close to 40. And the last one, right, masculinity and femininity, that was with the colors. So Indonesia is more dark red, so it's more masculine society, while the Netherlands is more feminine, right? The color is pink, all right? Okay, so let's start with the first one, collectivism and individualism, right? So like I said, Indonesia is more on collectivism, right? The group mindset, 14, while the Netherlands is all the way up to 80. So the Netherlands is a very individualistic society, right? What I read, that's actually, the Netherlands is in top 5 most individualistic societies in the world. So there's a whole list of things here. So this is mainly for individualism. Can you? And when I looked at this list, all the ones in red, I thought, yes, this is for the Netherlands, right? This is what the Netherlands is like, right? So for example, right of privacy, right? In the Netherlands, people really love their privacy, right? If you, how do you say, if you impact someone's privacy, people become very upset, right? Also, the one you see there, speaking one's mind is healthy, right? I even noticed that in Indonesia, that when I work, I am always very tempted to say what I think, right? And sometimes maybe people think like, wow, that Dino is like really direct, right? He's so rude. But that's just, I think, something that also came from my culture, right? If I don't agree with you, I will tell you, right? If I think that you're doing a bad job, I will tell you. So, and I also want you to tell me, actually. So that's something that's very important in my culture. And you also see this individualism, right, in the education, right? Learning how to learn. And there's several more. Right? Maybe next one. But then if you look at collectivism, right, the opposite, so Indonesia is more on collectivism. So there are very different things, right? So they focus more on we, on groups, right? Maybe because, of course, I'm not a real Indonesian, you are. So maybe you probably know which one here is really true for Indonesia, right? Maybe I can ask you, maybe, because I'm actually very curious to know. Maybe somebody here can say like, oh yeah, that one, that's really true for Indonesia. Who can give an answer? So which one of the list you think like, wow, this is really Indonesian culture? Who wants to try? Who dares to give an answer? Or maybe Altuba, you have, Miss Altuba, you have a thing like, oh, you think this is really Indonesian culture? Maybe if there's no answer for now, that's fine, because I think some of these are quite difficult. But maybe later you can think about this and you think like, wow, this one is really for Indonesia, right? Or maybe not. Right? But as I've shown the other ones, for individualism, right, almost all of them are true for the Netherlands, right? Netherlands is a very individualistic society. Oh, all right, we hear that maybe all of them could be true for Indonesia, right? Maybe you agree or maybe you disagree. But yeah, it's very different than the Netherlands. I just picked a few examples of individualism in the Netherlands. So if you see the top right picture, right, so you see some young people. These are probably high school students, right, from S.Psi, and they cycle to their school, right? Even if it is 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers, many kids still cycle to their school or walk to school. Because in the Netherlands, young children are learned that they have to be independent from a very young age, right? You want to go to school, you do it yourself, right? You want to go shopping, you go by yourself, right? So from a very young age, Dutch children get taught that you have to become independent, right? Another example of this is the picture on the left. So actually, these are women your age, right? So they're college students. Usually in the Netherlands, when people go to college, often, especially if they're studying in a different city, they don't live at their parents' house anymore. They move out, right? Maybe it's kind of like marantau, mungkin? Yeah. So they go out, right? And they start living on their own, but usually in groups, right? So the group of women that you see here, they're college students, so they're studying and they live in a house together, right? Usually it is separated, like women with women and men, but sometimes it can be mixed as well, right? But this is also an example of that learning independence, right? They don't need to stay with their parents anymore. They can do it themselves. They can clean their own house, they cook their own food, they do their own financial business, right? Everything by themselves, right? That's also a way how Dutch people promote this independence, right? I feel like here you also have that a little bit with, living in a kos, right? Maybe some of you here are not from Malang. Your parents maybe are still in another city. So then maybe living in a kos is similar to what we have in the Netherlands. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Actually, did you know that kos dari bahasa Belanda? Yeah. Word kost means like apa? Like your bread and butter, right? Your living, kost. Oh yeah, and the last picture, right? That's a really good example of that privacy, right? I always find this quite funny because if you look on the bottom right, you see there's a garden. But most gardens in the Netherlands have walls, right? So you see these, sometimes they are walls from wood, sometimes there are plants, but in general, people don't like to be looked at from the outside, right? If you have neighbors, right, they keep to themselves, right? Sometimes nobody can look into a garden, right? That's to keep their privacy, right? Maybe here in Indonesia, it's very common, right? You live somewhere, your neighbors come and they chat with you, right? And that's totally, I think that's really cool. But in the Netherlands, no. That's very uncommon, yeah. And especially dropping by someone's house without saying that you're coming, that's very rude, right? If you're not expecting it. So very different culture. Maybe these are some examples that I've seen here in Indonesia where you really have this feeling of collectivism, right? This group feeling. So first of all, family here is much more important than in the Netherlands, right? Another example would be the national feeling, right? I think all of you feel like you're really Indonesians, right? That's really cool for me because in the Netherlands, this feeling is not so much there, right? Netherlands is a very multicultural society, so the feeling of being a Dutch person, it's not really there, right? The focus is more on the individual, right? Right? People would say like, oh, yes, I am Dino, right? I am this, but I wouldn't say maybe I am Dutch. No, for me, not very important. Right? So very different culture also. Oh yeah, and the last one, that I found was really cool. I forgot the word. There is a word for this, right? The picture on the bottom. When you work in a group in your neighborhood, how do you call this? Okay. I don't know how to pronounce it, but that. Yes. So I think this is very common in Indonesia, where you work together in a group, right, to clean your neighborhood or to make something new. In the Netherlands, this is very uncommon, right? In the Netherlands, almost everything done outside is done by the government, right? Government does everything for you. You just pay your taxes, right? And the government will do the work for you. All right. Oh, and also, of course, I think this is a really cool example of collectivism. I think that pretty much everybody in Indonesia is very familiar with this one, right? In the Netherlands, we don't have that. Actually, to be honest, I think most people in the Netherlands, they don't even know the national anthem. Yeah, I can sing the first 4 lines of my national anthem, and then I'm just like, I don't know also. Okay, so the next one, right, to compare different cultures, that is power distance, right? So this is a really interesting one. The Netherlands has quite a low power distance, 38, and Indonesia has quite a high one, 78, right? I will give some examples later about what power distance is. Next one, please. So here's examples of small power distance, right? So about how parents treat their children, about if there is corruption or not. So a small power distance, there is probably no corruption. Also, sometimes about religion. If there's low power distance, then maybe the income in society is very equal, right? There's not a big gap between rich and poor. Also about treating the elderly, right? In small power distance countries like the Netherlands, older people are respected a little bit maybe, but they are not feared, right? So for me, for the Netherlands, the ones in red are, yes, that's Dutch culture, right? These ones apply for the Netherlands. And also even about education, right? With small power distance, there is student-centered education, right? So you can see an example of that here, right? In the Netherlands, education is really focused on the learner, right? Not so much about the teacher. Teacher is more there to facilitate learning, right? And you can see that in different schools, right? Even from a low age, usually the education is quite focused on the learner, right? And it goes through high school that way and even in college, right? When I was in college, so I studied urban and regional planning. I think you call that planology? Yeah. So I studied urban and regional planning, and actually many of my projects were involving model making, doing tasks, presenting work, and not too many lectures, right? It was more about working together, doing presentations, so also very much learner-based education, which I really enjoyed. And this is another really good example of low power distance in the Netherlands. Maybe can you raise your hand? Who here has ever joined a protest? Who has joined a protest?
Ada yang pernah ikut demo? Nggak ada?
No. I saw one hand there. Oh no. Oh, there was this. Okay. Clear. Oh, I see some in the back. Good. All right. So if we were in the Netherlands right now, there would be many hands going up, right? Because we have this small power distance, right? People, if they don't agree, they immediately start protesting, right? About all kinds of things, right? Here you can see some examples. The picture on the top left, that's a climate protest. There are climate protests throughout the year, right? I've joined, I think, probably about 6 of them, right? Another one on the bottom left is a protest against racism, right? Racism is a very controversial topic in the Netherlands, right? Something that you often get if you have a very multicultural society, right? So there's a lot of protest against racism. If you look at the top right, you see a farmers' protest, right? I think this is interesting because sometimes we think that protests are for left people, right? Left-wing politicians and left-wing voters. But actually, right-wing are also very likely to protest if they don't agree. And farmers are very notorious for their protests because when they protest, they will block all the highways, they will block distribution centers, it's chaos. Very interesting. And then the last one, right, the bottom right, that is also an interesting one because maybe you know that the Netherlands is famous for cycling, right? Di Belanda, budaya Belanda terkenal untuk bersepeda di mana-mana. But we have this culture because there were protests, right? In this example, you can see there is a protest in Amsterdam against many accidents happening with cyclists. So in the 60s and 70s, the Netherlands was very unsafe for cycling, right? There were a lot of accidents and also accidents with children, right? So sometimes children get in an accident, they die. Of course, if you are a parent and your child gets into an accident, you are upset, right? So because we have this small power distance in the Netherlands, so parents started protesting. And because they started protesting, now we have very good and safe cycling infrastructure, right? So this small power distance has had a very big impact on Dutch society. And now we have, maybe Indonesia has a larger power distance, right? Maybe one very clear example is corruption, right? In the Netherlands, we don't have that, right? In Indonesia, maybe a bit more, right? I think, yes, unfortunately. Yep. And maybe there's also other things, right? For example, which I think is quite good is that older people are respected, right? I think I wouldn't say that fearing other people is good, but respecting other people, older people, that's a good thing, right? Maybe there is more teacher-centered education, right? So I think in general, Indonesia has a larger power distance, right? I think sometimes there are protests here, but maybe it's not so common, right? So yeah, respecting the elderly, right? And also corruption, right? This is a kind of cool example because they're actually protesting, which is great. All right, then the last one I want to discuss a little bit is the masculinity versus femininity. Maybe, what do you think? Is Indonesia more feminine country or more masculine? I hear, who says masculine? All right, who says feminine? Okay, I think more people say masculine, right? And that's true, right? Indonesia is more towards the masculine side, right? The Netherlands is a quite feminine society, right? And being feminine doesn't mean that women rule the Netherlands, no, but maybe there are some things that might be seen as more feminine. All right, so of course, gender roles are less clear in a feminine society, right? Also, things about raising children, about balance between family and work. Right? Yeah, next one. Oh, maybe also, yeah. The example here that I want to give, in the Netherlands, it is very common for fathers to play a big role in the household, right? It's very common for fathers to cook, clean, do anything the women sometimes do. So that's very normal. I think sometimes if I hear stories here, maybe that's a bit more uncommon here. Maybe in general, the women are supposed to do the cooking and the cleaning, etc. All right, next one. Here's another little example of those gender roles in the Netherlands. So if you look at that gray line at the top, right, so that is the percentage of families where both parents are working, right, the father and the mother, right? So that's actually a very high percentage, right? And you can see that it is still rising, right? And if you look at that blue line, the middle blue line, that is the amount of families where the mother and father are working the same amount, right? For example, they are both working full-time, or they are both working part-time. Right? So in general, yeah, it's very common for families to have both the mother and father working. And also because the housing prices are very high, right? You have to work. And this is then the masculine side, right? Maybe for Indonesia, it is more towards this, right? Maybe there is more emphasis on the fathers, right? Maybe work is more important than family, right? Maybe the gender roles are more specific, right? Okay. But yeah, you probably know better than me which one of these is really specific for Indonesia. But yeah, maybe a few of them. Also, maybe good to mention, right? If you are interested in reading more about this, if you Google Geert Hofstede, that's the guy, the psychologist, you can learn all about his work. He has also very interesting videos about culture and about the dimensions, right? Probably much better than I can explain you right now. So I really recommend having a look at that website. Yep. All right, this is another example. I just thought, oh, like, you know, if in masculine societies maybe there are more politicians that are male, and maybe in feminine societies it would be more females. So you can see like they are the two governments, right? So there is your government, right, the Indonesian government. Actually, there are quite a few women, right? But you can still see that it is mostly black suits, right? Mostly men, right? So it's maybe more towards the masculine side. The Netherlands still has a majority of men, but I think a big percentage also female, right? So that's quite interesting. Here's another example. Something that is super important in Dutch culture is work-life balance, right? People really want to enjoy their free time, right? Let's say if you work in the Netherlands, right, and your boss asks you, can you do overtime tonight? Many people just say, no, I don't want to. Right? So they don't often do overtime. They might if they think, okay, it doesn't impact my social life, but if they have plans, if they just don't feel like it, yeah, people are not likely to do overtime because they really want to have this work-life balance, right? For example, I have a few friends in the Netherlands, and for them, also, work-life balance is really important. Sometimes they even choose to just work 3 days, right? If they can get enough money working 3 days and have free time 4 days, then seems great, right? So for them, they also think like work-life balance should be better. Right? And you can see here also like often they will do a lot of activities on their free days, right? They really try to enjoy it, right? Go walking outside, have drinks with their friends, right? Especially if the weather's nice. Okay, so this was a little bit to show you about how cultures can be very different, right? According to those 6 dimensions. So if you relate it back to that culture shock, right? If you can imagine, if an Indonesian student, right, goes to study in the Netherlands, those differences, right, the power distance, the masculine femininity, the individualistic versus collective, you will see that very visible if you stay in a country for a longer time, right? If you just go to do sightseeing for a week, you will not see those differences. But if you go there for a longer time, for example, you want to do a master degree in Maastricht for 2 years, for example, right? Then you will start seeing, right? There's very clear cultural differences, right? Also in those 6 dimensions, right? And that's when you might get culture shock, right? But also, because of that, you might get reverse culture shock, right? So when you come back home, right, you're so happy, you finished your master degree, right? You graduated, you come back home, and then suddenly the culture is super different, right? So you need to adapt again. So we already talked about, right? These can be your future patients, right? Indonesian students, international students, expats, migrant workers, right? Those are all people that might suffer from reverse culture shock. And obviously, right, reverse culture shock, when I say suffer, it's mainly suffering in your mental health, right? So maybe now I'll tell a little bit of a personal story. When I came back to the Netherlands after my travels, I was also experiencing reverse culture shock, right? And actually for me, the reverse culture shock was much worse than the culture shock, right? For me, the culture shock, like I said earlier, right? As a traveler, I was able to observe, but I didn't really suffer from it, right? It didn't have an impact on my mental health. But the reverse culture shock had a really big impact on my mental health. So maybe I just want to show you like the main things that I was struggling with, right? So when I came back to the Netherlands, right, there were 2 things, right? So what I want to do and my values, and what Dutch culture says, right? What Dutch culture expects from me, right? So like when I came back, right, I wasn't a traveler anymore, right? So I was not in a position where I could just observe. No, I was a Dutch person again, right? I was a local citizen, right? So I didn't have that privileged position, right? I was just a traveler. I was just a citizen again, yeah. So at that time, right, when I came back, you know, I started hanging out with my friends again, right? And especially, you know, at the age of 30, many friends, you know, started having really good careers, making a lot of money, starting families, getting married, right? That's not what I was doing. So that my Dutch culture and its expectations became very present in my mind, right? So I was losing sight of what I really wanted, right? So I was starting getting this reverse culture shock, right? So the impact of my culture was really affecting my mental health. So luckily, I had difficult times, but I was able to overcome it because I was able to use my support system, right? I think you're familiar with the word support system, right? That's where you get your support, right? Could be your family, could be your friends, could be someone else, maybe friends you have online, right? So for me, it was mostly my family, my sister and my parents. Like, because I had really good conversations with them, I was able to make a clear distinction, right? Okay, this is what I want. This is what the culture expects from me, right? So by making that distinction, I was able to see clearly, okay, like actually this is not what I want. This is just what the culture wants, right? This is what maybe Dutch culture wants. Maybe it's about, making a lot of money. Do I want that? No. It's about having high status. Do I want that? No. Right? Or it's about having a fantastic career. Do I want that? No. Right? So because of those conversations, I could see more clearly, right? What do I want? What does Dutch culture expect from me? Yep. Okay. But, right, so for me, I was lucky I had a support system. I did go to a psychologist 2 times, but it was not enough times, right? I was able to just use my family for that. But what if, for example, you are an Indonesian student, you just came back to Indonesia from 4 years of studying, you're suffering from reverse culture shock, right? It's hard to work here, like the people are different, the work culture is different, right? So you're suffering. But your family also doesn't understand you, maybe, right? Maybe your family agrees with the culture, right? Oh yeah, you should like do this and that, and it's not what you want, right? Then there's a problem, right? Your mental health is suffering, so who will be your support system? That's you, right? That's you, right? You are the future psychologist, right? I was very proud of myself for having an Indonesian joke in my presentation. Okay. But, right, as a psychologist or someone who works in psychology, right, then maybe as a professional you could help someone who suffers from reverse culture shock, right? So, of course, because I'm totally unaware of any methods used in psychology, I just use ChatGPT. So I was able to read a little bit about different methods people use in psychology, right? These are just some different methods that maybe you know better than me, but they're quite complicated. Of course, like as a psychologist, maybe you can use these methods to help patients, right? But again, I'm not an expert, so I won't say anything about it. But I will tell you what I think I can do if I experience reverse culture shock again. Because like if you had it one time doesn't mean that it's like, oh, it's solved now, it's finished. No. Of course you can get reverse culture shock again, right? When I go back to the Netherlands, I go back in April. Yes, I'm a little bit scared, like, ooh, like how will I feel when I come back, right? Will I experience that again? But I do have a few things that I plan to do when I get back. So the first one is, right, like I said, I really need to think about what do I really want, right? And what are my wishes and ambitions? And what does the culture expect from me, right? I need to make that distinction, right? All right, the second. When I've made the distinction, I need to write it down, right? Regularly, right? Maybe once every few months, right? And I also need to talk about it, right? With my support system or with my friends, right? Okay? Sometimes I think also, right, social media, and I think you all maybe suffer a little bit from that as well, can force certain cultural values on us, right? For example, in the Netherlands, maybe also in Indonesia, right, there's a very high emphasis, right? It's very important to have high status, right? For example, if you are an entrepreneur, if you have passive income, if you have a new beautiful car, right? If you work in finance, if you work at a bank, right? Oh wow, you're so cool. So sometimes in social media, right, you get that message a lot, right? Oh, if you want to be successful, you need to do this, 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 and this, and you need to have this, this, and this, and this, right? So I think I need to be careful with how I use my social media, right? If I use social media too much and those cultural values keep entering my mind, that can be dangerous, right? Okay. Also, right, I need to pursue my hobbies that I really like and that I want to do, and also do work in that field, right? I don't want to work in finance, right? I don't want to have like some high status job. No, if I want to be a teacher, for example, right? Teachers, usually in the Netherlands, teachers are not a very high status job, right? It's like, oh, I'm just a teacher, right? It's not like something super cool, right? But still, for me, I love to do it, right? I don't care what the culture says. Okay. And also, you have to become part of communities, right? For me, I think so important for mental health in general is to not isolate yourself, right? If you get isolated and you just become a victim of your own mind, it can go very wrong, right? So I think when you enter communities, especially communities that you really like, right, that your values are aligned, I think that can be like super useful, right? Right. Also, this one I think is important, and that's especially important when you do isolate yourself, right? If you don't talk to many people, you can sometimes assume what they think, right? It's like, oh yeah, like those people, they probably think that I am like just so stupid with my low status job, right? But you need to have real conversations with those people because often those assumptions are false, right? We need to find out for ourselves, right? And also the last thing, right, have a support group, right? I think especially for those people who come back to their country, right, dealing with reverse culture shock, they need to have a support group, right? All those Indonesian international students, the expats, right? When they come back, they need to have a support group who can help them, right? And of course, for this support group, it's very important that they don't force those cultural values too much, right? But again, you have to be lucky with your support group, right? You have to have good friends and good family, right? So these are just a few things that I would probably use when I come back to my country, right? I know that maybe I can suffer again from reverse culture shock, but this is how I plan to avoid that. Yep. Okay, so this will be a question for you. Later, you will answer this using your phone. So, right, let's say an international student, Indonesian international student, comes back to Indonesia after 2 years in New York City, right? That's pretty cool. But now she's back and she is struggling with reverse culture shock, right? What would you as psychology students, what would you recommend her to do, right? It can be something from the presentation. It can also be your own opinion, right? So that's the question. All right? So I have this little quiz ready to go. Maybe together with your neighbor, so in groups of 2 or 3, you can do the questionnaire. So in groups of 2 or 3, you can do the questionnaire. To do it, please scan the QR code. Okay, so in groups of 2 or 3, you can do the quiz. So scan the QR code. All right, I see quite a few people who scanned it. All right, if everybody has scanned it, yep, then I will go to the quiz. right, so maybe you're already ready to start with the quiz. I will start it up and we can start. Give me one moment. Okay. Present. All right, I see that you guys have already started. Good. We can see the live results on the screen. So this is the first question, right? Do you feel pressure from your culture to make personal, academic, and professional choices that don't align with your personal values and ambitions? Right? So I see some also like not at all, which is great. I think eventually I should see 50 answers. All right. I think, yeah, you can already see like most of you say a little bit, right? Maybe, I think that's quite good because if it's just a little bit, then maybe it's not in a way that really affects your mental health, right? But if you are one of those people who say like, yes, strong pressure, right? Maybe from your family, from your friends, and then maybe it can really affect your mental health, right? Okay, I think, oh, we even have more than 50. Fantastic. All right, so that was the first question. Let's go to the next question. All right, so maybe on your cell phones, you should see that you can go to the next question. Right, so the question is, do you think understanding the different dimensions of culture, right, those 6 dimensions, will help you in your future career in psychology? Oh, well, that's nice. I see a lot of people saying definitely. All right, a few more. All right, okay, I think we have most answers now. So that's actually good to hear. I think also, you know, if you really understand culture well, right, of course it's not just to help you with reverse culture shock, right? Even if you have people who are preparing to go to another culture, right, or who are thinking of maybe studying abroad, if you know the differences between culture well, maybe you can prepare yourself better, right? And also, I feel especially in this world today, right, we are so globalized, right? So it's really good to understand the culture as well. Okay, I think we can go to the next question. All right, so this one is about reverse culture shock, right? So for you as, you know, psychologists or future psychology professionals, right, do you think that you will get patients who are struggling with reverse culture shock? All right. I think also many people say like maybe, but maybe not many, right? Which I think it probably also depends maybe where you are working. Maybe if you are working in a city like Jakarta, right, I think the international character or like all the expats coming in and coming back, maybe more a case right there. But maybe if you're living in a smaller town, yeah, maybe you won't get a lot of patients who are dealing with reverse culture shock. Right? Okay, all right, so interesting. So you think maybe you will get some patients, right? I'm very curious. Maybe I can come back in 10 years and I will ask you. Okay, next question. Don't worry, there are only a few questions, so we're almost finished. The next one, right? Do you think there is a lot of attention and research available in Indonesia in the field of psychology for reverse culture shock? I have no idea.
Not really much.
Okay. Miss Altuba says maybe there is not a lot, right? And you can see there's only one person so far who has read about reverse culture shock before. Okay. Maybe also it's good to ask now, I'm just wondering in general, who of you has ever experienced culture shock? Maybe when you went on a holiday, who of you has ever experienced culture shock? Raise your hand. I for sure have experienced
Ada yang
culture
pernah
shock.
mengalami culture shock? Nggak harus from other
Yeah.
countries, right?
Well, you can also have culture shock in Sumatra, right? Or
Yeah,
you can have
yeah.
culture shock in Bali.
Dari Bali, dari Papua, dari NTB, NTT. Oh, that's one in the back.
Oh, okay, nice, yeah. All right. Oh, in the back there also some
yeah,
guys.
more than
yeah.
one.
Cool. All right. I think maybe that's really interesting in Indonesia because it's such a massive country, right, with so many different cultures. If you go to another island, right, I think sometimes you can also experience culture shock there, right? Maybe if you start a job in Medan, right, people there maybe are very different than people here in Malang. Right? Okay, but back to the original question. So you can see here, right, in general, I think reverse culture shock is not that well known here, right? But I think really it will become more visible in the future, right? With so many international students, right? So many Indonesian going out to Europe and America, so many expats, right? So I think reverse culture shock, I think you will hear more about it. Okay, so here we come back to that question I had about the situation earlier, right? So there is a student, she studied in New York City for 2 years, right? And she comes back, but she's struggling with reverse culture shock. What would you tell her to do? Right? So please write down your answers, right? And then we can see them on the screen. Take your time.
Boleh direspon dengan bahasa Indonesia ya?
Yes, you can also respond in Indonesian, please. Maybe just to be clear, this question, it's not a yes-no question, right? So how can you help this person, right, these students who come back, how can you help them? Maybe you tell them, oh, you should do this, or you should do that, or you should talk to a psychologist. So familiarize yourself, okay, that's a good one. Maybe also familiarize with the culture you're going to. Okay, let's get some more answers.
Ya, boleh dikerjakan, take your time. Kita beri waktu untuk mengerjakan, ya. Jadi apa yang akan kalian lakukan untuk membantu mahasiswa internasional yang kembali ke Indonesia dan mengalami reverse culture shocks? Kan sudah
Especially
belajar
reverse.
psikologi.
Right, we have some more. Introducing Indonesian culture and customs. Well, that could be the case, but let's say this is for an Indonesian international student coming back, right? But it could be, you know, an idea for this person to reintroduce themselves with the positive sides of the culture, right? Trying to learn again about traditions, about customs, mindfulness. Oh, I really like that answer. Mindfulness. Yeah, that's a really good one. Not be afraid of culture shock, right? If you know that it's coming, right? Maybe it's easier also, right? You're expecting culture shock. Cultural reintegration, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's also like maybe by accompanying them and guiding them slowly back into their culture. Maybe, can we scroll down? All right. We also have some people who want to say hi. That's good. Oh, wait. Search information about the culture. Oh. want to scroll? Let's see. Okay. So yeah, search information about the culture. Here, in my opinion, maybe together with their friends, right? Try to do that by going out, socializing, sharing stories. Yeah, that's a really good answer, right? You want to use that support group, right? Okay, maybe I need some translation help with these two. Sharing, okay. Uh-huh. Like do a consultation, I guess. Right. Maybe. Oh, this one, I think opening yourself, right? That's really important, right? You don't want to keep it inside, right? If you're dealing with reverse culture shock, you have to go and talk to your support group, right? Individual counseling with a professional, right? I think, well, I'm not sure how that is here in Indonesia, but maybe getting professional help maybe has a taboo sometimes, right? Maybe if you go to a psychologist, maybe you feel ashamed, but I think also I agree that can be very valuable, right, if you're dealing with reverse culture shock. To try and adapt yourself again to your own culture, yeah. Cultural adjustment, yeah, counseling, normalization of the experience, right? That's a really good one as well, right? You don't want it to stay a taboo, right? You want to normalize it, right? It's totally fine if you're dealing with reverse culture shock. It's a normal thing. Yeah, facilitating social support network, group therapy, okay, nice. Workshop. Yeah, reintroduce the culture, adapt yourself again, right? Oh, here. Relearning or adapting to a new environment. Building new relationships and friendships, yeah. I think that's, again, right, you want to maybe make your support stronger. Yeah. Get support.
Social adaptation.
Yes, social adaptation skill. Go to a psychologist. Oh yeah, maybe talk to those Indonesian students about their culture, right? Like a good conversation. Providing professional services and emotional support. Calming them, yeah. Everything is okay, that's good. Encouraging social interaction. If you see someone who might experience reverse culture shock, right? I think as a good friend, right? You want to get them out of that isolation, right? You don't want them to stick with their problems, right? We can help them. Give them space and time for adjustment, yeah. And then giving them emotional support. Let's see this last one. Communication and sharing, yeah. Well, I have to say that I think there's a lot of really good answers here. So I'm pretty confident if you guys have any friends who come back from their studies, I think you can be a really good support group, right? Yeah. Yes, okay, good. All right, there's one more question, a very important question that I will go to right now. How do I? Okay, the most important question of all of them. Okay, please answer the question, all right? I really need to know this. This is very important. Yes, good answer. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going very well.
Yes.
Okay. Uh-huh. I think we should share this result later with the government that we can get this to become official.
Sadar nggak jawabannya yes semua? Nah, kalian diperalat loh.
Okay, well, thank you for answering this question. I think the result is very clear. Yep, I totally agree also. Okay, I think that was it for the questions. I will go back to the PowerPoint. So, yeah, okay. So that was my presentation. Thank you so much for listening. I'm hoping that even though it was in English, you understood it. And maybe you also have any questions for me or about reverse culture shock? Yes. Maybe shall I give you, oh, there's a microphone coming.
There's microphone.
Okay, good morning, Mr. Dino Johannes. Nice to meet you. It is an honor to be part of today's guest lecture in University of Merdeka, Malang. My name is Hunainin Mufidul Kiram, can be called Hans. I'm from Faculty of Psychology. Actually, I have two questions, but I want to ask one question too. Okay, my question is based on your travel and experience, have you encountered cultural practice that have positively impacted the mental health of communities, and how could this practice be integrated into broader mental health interventions? That is, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So, if I understand the question correctly, based from my experiences traveling, have I seen any practices that can positively impact mental health intervention, right? Okay. That is a really good question. Wow. Let's see. I think I couldn't tell you if I've seen any like professional interventions. So for example, like I rarely meet psychologists, but I think in general, like one thing that maybe helped me so during my travels is to really keep my support group close, right? So for example, whenever, even when I'm not struggling, I always try to keep in touch with my support group back home. Right? So for example, my support group is mainly my direct family, so my parents and sister, right? So even though some years ago, I would only call them maybe once a month, right? Once every 2 months. But now I call them I think every 4 days, right? Because I know that if I keep talking to them, right? If I keep those conversations going, it really helps me with my mental health, right? Also, whenever I experience culture shock, or if I come back home, if I experience reverse culture shock, right? So I think one important thing I could mention is like really do your best to keep your support group close, right? Make it a regular thing, right? Maybe one other thing I just thought about, let's see. I forgot. But the first one about the support group is very important, yeah. So maybe, does that answer your question a bit? All right, thank you. Maybe there is another question from someone else. Yes, over there.
Okay, thank you. Thanks before. My name is Kayla. Sorry for my bad English. In actually, what's your motivation to traveling? Then do you have a worst experience about culture shock makes your mental health down, especially in Indonesia? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. So I think there were two questions. I think one was why did I start traveling? And the second one, was there something specific about Indonesian culture that affected my mental health, right? Okay, the first question, why did I start traveling? I actually started traveling for a long term because I wanted to learn more about sustainable agriculture. So I already finished my studies about planology, right? I was not that interested anymore, but I really wanted to learn more about sustainable farming. And I wanted to really learn what is farming like for people in other countries, right? So that's when I started traveling, visiting farms, right, in Nepal, Cambodia, Thailand, some other places, and learning about farming. And over time, I still really enjoy farming, but then I also started to do volunteering work as an English teacher and some other things. But the original idea was learn about farming. Okay, that was the first question. The second question was about how certain things from Indonesian culture affected my mental health. I think, like I told earlier, like there are some things about Indonesian culture that for me can be difficult to deal with, right? For example, the jam karet is one. I can also tell you now that, for example, now in Malang, I'm working full-time in an NGO, in an organization about education, and sometimes I struggle with how people can be quite indirect, right? So, like I told earlier, Dutch people can be very direct, right? If I don't like something, I tell you, right? If I want to change something, I will tell you. But I feel maybe in Indonesia, people, they are more indirect, right? Maybe they don't tell you directly, they maybe give you some hints. Maybe the communication is also more indirect. And sometimes that can be quite hard to work with, right? I'm not sure if I would say that it has like a very big impact on my mental health. Not yet. Maybe later. Maybe later it will. But I can imagine, for example, if you are an expat who works here for a longer time, I think that can be very difficult to deal with, right? Because maybe the Indonesian way of communicating is very different than the European way of communicating, right? I think especially, like I said, Europeans like to do direct communication, direct feedback, right? Direct answers, and maybe here in Indonesia, that's maybe more difficult to get, right? So I think that would be like one important aspect of Indonesian culture that can be difficult and maybe even can impact your mental health. Yeah. Does that answer the question? Yeah? Okay. All right. Any other questions? No other questions? Really? Feel free to ask something. Okay. I think that's it.
Ada yang tanya lagi? Ada? Nothing? Enough? Oh, ya.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, good morning. First, welcome to University of Merdeka Malang. Let me introduce myself. My name is Joko Saputra. You can call me Joko. First, if I'm not any student in Merdeka, University of Merdeka Malang, I'm also the work in hospitality industry. This is a question I often ask my kids. Before you come to Indonesia, what do you think about Indonesia? Thank you.
That's a good question, yeah. Thank you. All right. That's nice to hear also you're from a different sector, right? Hospitality. Let's see. Before I came to Indonesia, what did I think about Indonesia? Well, actually, this is actually an interesting one because the first time that I came to Indonesia was 10 years ago. Actually, it was on a family trip. But before that, actually, most of the things that I heard about Indonesia was from my grandparents, right? So my grandfather was born in Semarang, and my grandmother was born in Malang, right? So they used to live there when they were very young, right? After the Second World War, they went to the Netherlands, right? So I heard a lot of stories from their childhood, right? So actually, before I came to Indonesia, my image of Indonesia was mainly taken from those stories, right? So, for example, there were a lot of stories about life in the neighborhood, right? They would say stuff like, oh yeah, like in the morning there would be the satay guy coming, and then we would eat satay together or something like that, right? So they were very kind of like cute stories. But when I came to Indonesia, right, of course it was very different, right? Because those stories are from like 1940, 1945, right? So that's like 80, 70, 80 years ago. So super long time ago. Of course, now the Indonesia is totally different, right? Even in Malang, last year, I wanted to see if the neighborhood where my grandmother used to live, which is Bunorejo, right? My grandmother used to live in Bunorejo 70 years ago, if I could recognize something from her childhood. Of course, I couldn't see anything, right? Because it already changed so much. Right, so I think so to answer your question, right, so my, what I think of Indonesia before I came here was really an old image of Indonesia that is no longer true, right, so now that I've been to Indonesia, it's very different, but I still love it, right, this is already my, I think, 6th time coming back, yeah, so yeah, I still love Indonesia, yeah, all right, thank you. Does that answer your question? Enough? No? Maybe if no, then you can answer ask another question. If it doesn't answer your question really, then maybe you want to ask another question, or it's okay? Enough? Okay, thank you. All right. Any other questions?
Can I? You
Yeah.
said that you very love Indonesia. That's why you come Indonesia 6 times, right? 6 times. Then will you live in Indonesia as a local?
Well, I think
Or just visit Indonesia like Singapore?
no. I think for me, I like living in Indonesia. So I think for me, like Indonesia is not like Singapore at all, where I just want to be a visitor. Actually, now that I'm in Malang, for example, I really like to join the local communities, right? For example, there is a few walking groups here. So what's it called? There's something called Before Work in Malang. It's like a running group. Every Wednesday morning, I usually join. And there's also a group in Malang called Footish Malang, which is a walking group that does activities every Tuesday morning and Thursday morning. And there's also something called Run Malang, which is another running group. So I think now I actually I'm trying to step out of the visitor identity, and I want to become more part of the community. Not because I want to be an Indonesian, but more because I really enjoy to experience the culture on a deeper level, right? And I think to do that, you need to join the local communities. Right? So, for example, joining those running clubs and walking clubs. Right? So maybe, does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you so much. That's answer my questions about how much you love Malang. Ya.
Love Malang so
Tepuk
much.
tangan dong. Ada orang luar tuh suka sama Malang loh. Kalian yang Arema harusnya lebih cinta Malang lagi ya kan? Atau yang Indonesia tuh lebih Indonesia lagi. And thank you so much because I see you wear batik so. Yeah, so
I love
beautiful
batik.
on you. Yeah, what's about us? Yeah, thank you so much for wearing that suit for coming here. Yeah. Oke, ada pertanyaan lagi? Oke.
Good morning, sir. My name is Sultani Haji. According to you, how can Indonesian people respect a nature like Dutch people there? Maybe you can give a few tips. Thank you, sir.
All right. Oh, that's a really good question. So, how can Indonesians respect nature, right?
Yes. More like
so
like Dutch people there. Maybe you can give a few tips.
All right. Okay. That's a really good question. Okay. Well, like one thing that I now think of immediately is to start young with educating about nature. Right? So for example, I think the picture that I showed earlier, right, with the biology teachers, I really believe that if you can teach children in their early education about the value of nature, right, why we should respect nature, what nature provides for us, right? Because nature gives us, you know, clean air, clean water, wood. You know, it does so many things. So I think if you can teach that to young children, you know, they will take those lessons with them when they become older, right? And I think when a person really understands the value of nature, then you won't destroy it, right? You will respect it, right? So I think that would be, yeah, one thing that I could recommend is like to make that part of education. And maybe I think something that any one of us can do is, I also try to do that, is, you know, sometimes I think in culture, if something is uncommon, for example, when I do hiking in Indonesia or in other countries, when I see trash, I try to pick it up and I put it in a plastic bag and I take it with me. Right? Many people look at me very weird, right? Or even here in the supermarket, if I say like, no, I don't want a plastic bag, right? Or I bring my own mug for coffee, right? I get maybe weird looks, but I don't care. So I feel like sometimes when you want to change that, for example, change the way we treat nature, you have to lead by example, right? Maybe you know that phrase, like you have to show them the right way to do it, right? Even though it's weird for them, by showing them, maybe they will join you. And when more people join, it becomes less weird, right? So I think also with how we treat nature, right? For example, when you go into nature later, right? You have to show the example of how do we treat nature, right? How do we respect it? So I think those are, two things I could recommend, right? One is educating children about the value of nature, and the second one is leading by example, right? Respecting nature, keeping it clean, like that. Hopefully that answered your question. Yeah? Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No?
Okay, enough? Okay, enough. Okay, thank you. Enough. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Dino. You can have your seat. And I think the presentation is so cool, right? So interesting and open up our mind to understand psychology or mental health from another lens. It's from traveler or long-term volunteer. And I hope it can teach us many things and can impact our life. Then the last question is about how to teach other people, Indonesian people, to respect nature. I think it can be start from our family. From the family, we can start to teach the children to respect nature, because it's our nature. It have many value, and we live here. So thank you for opening up our mind about the nature. And for the participant, I say thank you so much for today. Your engagement is so crucial in raising awareness about mental health from another perspective. And let's continue the conversation and work together toward meaningful. Thank you so much. Good morning. Good morning. Terima kasih untuk Dino juga. Actually, Dino speak Indonesia very well, but I just say don't speak Indonesia so much because my student is international student. Amin. Ya, jadi harus biasa pakai bahasa Inggris. Although Dino speak Indonesia so well. Ya, terima kasih untuk semuanya. Terima kasih untuk Dino. Selamat pagi. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Sampai bertemu lagi di kesempatan yang lebih baik lagi.
Okay, once again, please give applause to Mr. Dino and Thuba as a moderator. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we finally come to the end of today's agenda. So, those are the agendas we have presented to you all this morning. How is it? Is it inspiring you guys? Maybe you guys starting to want to be traveler like Mr. Dino did. Okay, we hope you learn something from this international guest lecture. Thank you so much for your attention. See you on the next occasion. So before we close the guest lecture, maybe we can take a photo session together with Mr. Dino. But before we start to take a photo session together, we have gift for Mr. Dino Johannes. Please. Thank you very much before. What? It's not. Right now we have a take photo session. So where? Jadi Mr. Dino is right here. Okay. A lecture. Okay, stand up please, guys, to take a photo session. Oke, teman-teman yang ada di sisi kiri dan sisi kanan mohon untuk merapat ke tengah ya. Terima kasih. Okay, thank you. Please give applause to us, guys. Thank you very much. Thank you. Terima kasih teman-teman atas partisipasinya. Tadi teman-teman dapat kertas dari RBA? Dapat? Dapat kan? Nah, nanti ada yang nggak dapat? Oh, cuma beberapa. Nah, yang tadi dikasih sama kakaknya tolong dikumpulkan ke kakak yang tadi yang ngasih ya. Oke? Oke, terima kasih. Jadi acara hari ini telah selesai teman-teman. Terima kasih banyak atas partisipasinya. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Have a good day.